Yeah.
The constituency is Mayaro.
Right. But it extends all the way into Rio Claro, right?
That's correct.
Correct. Good
Good
morning.
morning, Mr. Paray, MP Paray. How are you this morning?
Good morning, and thank you for the invitation this morning, and thank you for allowing me into your studio and your viewers and listeners' homes this morning, this beautiful Monday morning.
All
This
right. I think
interesting
this might
Monday
be the
morning.
first time we're interviewing you, Mr. Parry, if I'm not mistaken.
I would have been on a couple of the radio programs when you were on the radio frequency, very short stints, but I've spoken on one or two before.
All right. Anyway, well, let's get the results of our poll before we
Well,
get
let's
into
ask him first.
Well, yeah,
the
we can ask him.
We have to
Go
ask
ahead.
Mr. Parry the question. The question is, where the question going? Right, this is the question, Mr. Parry. Should the government explain the reason or reasons as for the major changes of the SSA?
Absolutely. I think the government ought to explain, not necessarily into the nitty-gritty where you have to expose perhaps secrecy or secret information. But I suspect that the sudden change in the SSA would have come out of the meetings that the Prime Minister would have had in Washington a couple of weeks ago, because I do know, and from my information, is that the US government had asked that the TT government look closely at any of our local policing agencies that is having relationships with US elite units. So it was not a surprise to me when I heard a rumor of an urgent cabinet meeting sometime in the night, 2 nights ago, and only to see this notice yesterday that there has been a sudden removal of the head of the SSA. I do think that the crime situation is worrying to our international partners. I think we still remain under these travel advisories under the US government, Canada, and Britain. And these are 3 main trading partners at the end of the day. What we as the public may not know is what happens in the undercurrents of the criminal world. You have a serious issue of transnational crime. All these things are the focus of our international partners. So I am not surprised that based on the requirements of the US government, I think all of our policing agencies that are liaising with the United States government, some sort of work is going to be done, because complaints, I'm sure, would have been raised at those meetings in Washington.
So what are the implications then, because the SSA is the country's premier intelligence gathering agency?
It is. And I mean, one would ask, the public would ask, how effective have they been? The SSA has been around for quite some time. Look at the spiraling rate of crime in the country. And what we see on the surface is, I would suspect, in the iceberg formula, we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. We are not privy to what comes before the National Security Council weekly. And I suspect that information that comes to them is cause for serious concerns. So it is worrying. I mean, the national community should take this as a huge red flag. And it should also be a notification that the state perhaps is finally waking up that this crime issue, and I know the United National Congress have been doing our crime consultations over the last couple of months, and it has been raising the awareness of the general public. And I think the government perhaps woke up 2 nights ago and said, look, we need to start doing something. But it is concerning.
Okay, interesting. So let me give the results of our poll then. 28 of you said yes, they should explain, and 10 said no. I took note of Marcia Rock and Helen Prescott's responses before I added. So 28 said yes, they should explain, and 10 said no. All right. Our guest, of course, is Member of Parliament for Mayaro, Mr. Rushton Paray.
So the UNC hasn't officially put out a statement. Dr. Monilal last night made a comment, asked questions about this and said the government needs to explain. I'm paraphrasing here, of course. From the opposition's perspective, how do you feel about this development? Because, the SSA has come under scrutiny even as under the UNC's tenure from 2010 to 2015. And there has always seemed to be now adding this new development to it, some concerns about that agency and its propriety in many different ways.
Well, the work of the SSA, as you know, it's really bogged down in a lot of secrecy at the end of the day. It is an elite unit of our security services. They have a constitutional mandate. So the SSA should not get up one day and decide, well, I want to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. There are three persons who commands the helm of the intercepting component of the SSA, which is really the key area in terms of intelligence gathering. You have the director of the SSA, you have the commissioner of the police, and the chief of defense staff. These three gentlemen hold the power of the SSA in their hands.
Well, so, gentlemen and lady.
Gentlemen and lady. Yeah. Holds the power in their hands. So, it is quite concerning. I mean, as a citizen of the Republic, it is concerning when you have these sudden upheavals in the organizations of these elite special policing units. So I agree with Dr. Monilal. I think some explanation must be given. And as I say, we do not have to cross into the area of secret information or secret things that will put the country under national security watch. But some explanation, because what you would find is that the silence of the state will create tremendous speculation amongst the citizenry. And I think that is what no government ought to allow. And this government, it has been a trend on everything. Agreements with Venezuela has been, muddled in secrecy. Everything that the state is doing with regards to our international relationship, they take an issue of total secrecy on it. I am not saying that everything you must discuss, but you must give the electorate, you must give the citizenry some assurance that we are on the right track. And I think the government has to come and do the same with this arrangement with the SSA.
Don't you think, Mr. Paray, that in their bringing back of Mr. Philip Spencer and the mandate he has been given based on the report that we have, that might be the explanation within there?
So I had the pleasure of meeting a retired Brigadier Spencer in Washington sometime in 2017. We did spend some time together having conversations. I know he is a wonderful man, very gentle guy. I was impressed with his conversations while we were in Washington. But connect the dots for a minute. You have Brigadier Spencer, who has been in the circles of Washington for the last 8 years. I have prefaced my conversation on the SSA that I suspect it is a requirement of the US government to relook at local policing agencies and their relationship with US elite agencies to make sure you have that connection. So relationship is important. I would probably deduct that perhaps that relationship between our SSA and US special agencies may not have been in the best form as they are expecting. So let's take someone like
based on what you make a statement that our high-level security agencies may not be in the best relationship with the US.
Well,
based on because the Prime Minister just returned from Washington and seemingly had lots of conversations with the FBI and the CIA, and indicated quite a bit of information actually to the public that criminal elements are looking at TNT because of our vulnerabilities. So I'm trying to figure out where you're basing that assumption.
Well, I base the assumption that they move a man overnight. I don't think, I mean, you have this thing happening, and understand my point. I'm saying we've had Mr. Bas there for quite some time. You have a situation where conversations would have been happening with the US government and the Trinidad and Tobago government. We have had to move Mr. Bas, bring Brigadier Spencer. He has a mandate, but I suspect that 5 or 6 points in terms of rationalization, equipment, person, manpower, routines, Mr. Spencer is still the head of the SSA going forward, and he would be required to take command of every other routine and job description as the head of the SSA. Those would have been highlighted for public consumption. We don't know if there are other issues that are his focus, but they choose not to put it out into the public space. But I want to just return back to Brigadier Spencer for a minute, in terms of the fact that he is well known in the Washington circles. To me, that is a relationship strengthening arrangement because he's well known. The only challenge that I have, while I love the fact that we have a number of public officers who are retired with tremendous institutional knowledge in all aspects of governance and running this country, I do feel certain positions need a bit of youth energy, a bit of vigor in being ready to take the run, because it's a challenging task. And, really have the local knowledge of how things happening here in Trinidad and Tobago. So I see retirees bringing their institutional knowledge to give guidance, absolutely. But I am all for, allowing persons who are very well qualified to in the same fields, but bring a bit of youth and enthusiasm and energy.
Speaking of younger people taking the helm.
No way going in.
How is the United National Congress? I mean, there's been so much speculation about your ambitions.
Well, I mean,
Mr. Pasabi says is the political leader. She has a really seemingly a strong grip on the UNC base, and there have been speculations that Rushton Paray may be challenging Mrs. Pasabi Sessa for leadership soon. Is that accurate?
I don't think that is accurate at all. At the end of the day, let's put a couple things on the table here. There is no leadership election on the imminent horizon. The constitution of the party puts election for the leader, the political leader, once every 3 years, and that is not due until 2025. But there is a national executive election which is constitutionally due in June of this year. And I think that the membership, the wider membership, is very, very excited about participating in that election that is going to come. Now, that is not an election for I to call. At the end of the day, the political leader and the NATEX, which is the leadership of the party, will make a decision on that. But, I want to preface that also and say that the UNC was the party that first brought one man, one vote to put the political environment here in Trinidad and Tobago. I think the PNM did it sometime after. So there is a foundation of democracy in the United National Congress. And when you speak to the membership, I mean, I am always in my constituency speaking to members of my party, speaking to members of every electoral district. And there is a common thread. They want to exercise their right to have a say on who takes the team into 2025. And I think that is something important when you listen to your membership. And I do trust that the party looks at that, notwithstanding whatever environment we are going to be in the middle of the year. I think the membership is asking about the opportunity to cast their right, because we have...
And that executive election decides who will be deputy political leaders, etc. Explain that to us,
That's
please.
correct. So the NATEX consists of about 24 positions. It's 4 deputy political leaders, 3 deputy political leaders, chairman, vice chairman, treasurer, education officer, international relations officer, and a bunch of regional coordinators somewhere along the line, policy and strategy. Not the leader. The political leaders election is due in 2025. So really, it's the one time where the voice of your membership gets to make that decision. Like in any democratic process, I mean, we go to the polls once every 5 years. There's the talk that you have no voice after you vote. But that time when you are allowed to vote, you can make your voice loud and clear. And I am telling you from the talk that I am hearing, the membership really wants an opportunity to have that opportunity to refresh or reset in terms of the national executive.
What does that mean in your mind?
Well, it means that, in my view, we need the best version of the UNC to take the PNM head on in 2025. And there must be an opportunity for the party to decide whether we are at the best version of ourselves right now, or we need a new team to give us the best version. Because in my respectful view,
Do you think this is the best version of the UNC now?
well, that's the version we have. And I
But
can
do
tell
you
you,
think the present version is the best version of the UNC now?
well, I think there's room for growth and for strengthening. Oh, absolutely. Evolution in politics is needed all the time. And as we evolve as a political organization, we have to clean up, loose ends, areas where we may be a bit weakened. But that is not my call. That is the call of the membership, and the membership has to call for that. And
Isn't it you're considering, Mr. Paray, contesting one of these positions in the UNC at the NATEX?
It has been brought to my attention. I mean, Mayaro, my constituents in Mayaro, they talk to me about that all the time. Rushton, you could play a bigger role, you could do this, you could do that, right? But while I have not made a firm decision, I can tell you that, like every other member of the party, I want the right to vote. I want the right to vote to make sure that the best team of the UNC goes into 2025 at a general election.
If you had to contest a position, what position would you contest?
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I have not considered it in any deep perspective. Obviously, any one of the roles, I do believe that I will be very, very effective in. Just as a sideline, I mean, at the age of 22, I was invited to join the Lions Club of Mayaro. After spending years as a young man in my business with my parents, working with the community, working with sporting organizations and so on, the Lions Club saw the worth that I have. And I was invited, and I've been a member of the Lions Club for going in over 30 years. So too in my work as a member of parliament, I do a considerable amount of work in so many different areas in the constituency. I am not surprised that, people or the constituent, the membership do feel that I have something of value to offer in terms of providing guidance and leadership at the end of the day. And the membership will decide that when that time comes.
Yes,
but what do you want?
A wonderful politically correct statement. Just pushing the envelope just enough, not to push yourself on anyone, but opening it to the membership.
Well, Wendell, let me answer it this way, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think there is a police constable who joins the Trinidad and Tobago Police Service who doesn't want to be commissioner one day.
Okay.
I hope that answers the question.
Well, that's very clear, Mr. Paray.
Good.
And my understanding from the people of Mayaro is that you are extremely popular, but you may not be so popular within your own bowels because of the hand that you stretch. I've heard that too. You want to clear that up for us this morning?
Well, I can clear this way. I have the greatest relationship with all of my colleagues. Mm-hmm. None of my colleagues have any untoward thoughts about me, and neither do I. I work very, very well with my colleagues. There are people who are peddling this thing that perhaps that there's a rift between the political leader and myself, and that's not the case. We had a nice conversation on Friday in the parliament. We raised some matters. I raised some matters with her. And I can tell you this. Mrs. Prasad Bisesa is a lovely lady. She listens. While we meet all the time, MPs speak to the political leader all the time. When we sit at caucus, we will discuss matters of bills and so on. But as any employee, you want to discuss matters of work where you need an hour and a half of the leader's time. Well, then you write, you ask, and from time to time, you are allowed to sit down and have a conversation. And, more talk is important. And, there is something that I read, a nice quote the other day, about leadership is that, when leaders stop talking, the people who follow you stop talking as well. Mm-hmm. So it's important that, leaders continue having conversations with its membership, because you want your membership to speak. So you'll be appraised of issues, and you can make the necessary changes that is required to move forward.
Did you raise the issue of Mrs. Prasad Bisesa referring to some of the followers of the UNC, whether past or present, as sheep? Did you get a chance to raise that with her? Because I noted your release last week that called about the legacy of Bas Pand being disrespected.
Well, let me close that matter by saying this, because I think it has been fully ventilated on social media. I have the greatest respect in the world for Mr. Pandey. My parents and Mr. Pandey and Mrs. Pandey have had a long, long history. I do admire him, just as I admire Mrs. Bisessa as well. Both of them, the work that they both have done, have created the UNC to be the formidable political force it is today. But we must always be mindful that strong and effective leadership is grounded on respect for the membership of the party. And I want to end by saying Mrs. Bisessa did give me some good advice. She says, let us not focus on anything else but the collapsing state of our economy, runaway crime, collapsing infrastructure, all under the watchful eye by a very lazy administration. And I agreed with her, and we're focusing on that going forward.
So you've forgiven her for calling your membership
well, there is nothing to forgive, right? Just as you are entitled to an opinion, my commentary was not directed at anyone. There was a lot of people saying a lot of negative things about Mr. Pandey. And I said that, we must never forget that, we owe where we are in the United National Congress to both the work of both Mr. Pandey and Mrs. Bisessa.
You are a diplomat par excellence, let me tell you.
Next thing
what are your thoughts on Rushton Paray, on the recent comments by Gary Griffith and the seeming rift between Mr. Griffith and who he described as the person he purported as the person who may have been whispering in Mrs. Bisessa's ear about collaboration between the UNC and the NTA, and also the recent endorsement of Philip Alexander and the PEP of the UNC, and the fact that the third parties, well, the PNM has always stated that they're going alone, so that's not an option for any of the third parties. The PNM is a solo player, and they have never opened the door to collaborating with any other party in national elections or local government elections. So the third parties seeming to go toward the UNC as an option for some sort of partnership arrangement again. What are your thoughts on those developments?
So the name of the party that I subscribe to is the United National Congress, and U stands for United. So that tells me that there is an opportunity for unity at all times. Now, I am not privy, because I don't sit in the leadership, I don't sit in the national executive. So I'm not privy to a lot of the nitty-gritty of what are the arrangements between the third-party political agencies and so on. I know we welcome everybody under the umbrella of the United National Congress because we're united. But I can say this, the United National Congress will work with anybody until the relationship becomes unworkable. And whenever it becomes unworkable, I am sure we will do some work internally to see if it was our fault. But I assure you, if it is from Wayne Koblal Singh come right back to Gary Griffith or the PEP, we will continue to remain a political organization that welcomes all persons on board, and we will work hard with these relationships to make it work.
What do you think? What do you think the UNC should have learned from the 2010-2015 partnership experience? Because by the end of the term, the UNC stood in government alone, and the partnership partners had all fallen by the wayside. Some attributed to their own issues, some attributed to the UNC minimizing their role in the partnership. What do you think should have been learned from that experience based on what you just said?
I know a lot of things would have been said over the years in terms of why those collapses happened, because, what the membership of the party says is that they couldn't understand how in the two occasions that the UNC have been in government, in 1995 and in 2010, the performance of the UNC was beyond expectation. Yet, when we went to the polls at 5 years after, the party lost government. And you come to the question of managing relationships. Well, I can tell you from as a businessman, I have to manage several relationships with people who work with me as well. Not all of us are in the same, if you want to call it, line and length. But I believe politically, we ought to have managed expectations better. I don't think we may have done that. Whether the timing was too short, whether everything was a hodgepodge very, very quickly. But to me, going forward, I mean, you've had the PEP talk about, lining up and supporting the UNC and so on, and all that is welcome. But I trust at the end of the day, as all these little groupings, because everybody has value, every single person has value to the effective development of Trinidad and Tobago. But the UNC is the big umbrella. This is the political movement. There are two political forces to government, which is the PNM and the UNC. I belong to the UNC. We have to make sure that the relationship that you manage is respectful and that you manage the expectation of the other party. You set clear guidance and control points where you have levers. But that's a management issue. That's a personality issue. And I do feel that it is not beyond us in the United National Congress to do it, because I am of the firm belief, and I'll reiterate again, that every single person, be it Michaela Pandey, be it PA, be it Gary, everybody will have tremendous value as we take Trinidad and Tobago forward.
I've just seen a comment. I don't know if it's from Dr. Fuad Khan, but it's from A. Fuad Khan asking a question. Why is the UNC not registering new members at the head office? Would you care to comment on that?
Okay, so apparently there was an issue with the old forms, and a decision was taken at some point in time. I'm not aware when that decision happened, but a decision was made to cancel the old form, create a new form. So there are new forms that are available. As a matter of fact, on Friday, when I went to collect my nomination form, I picked up membership forms as well. So membership forms are available at party headquarters right now. I think for members of the public wishing to join, you are entitled to 5 forms. I do believe councillors, aldermen, MPs, and so on can write the general secretary to get forms in bulk so they can distribute it out there within their specific areas. But forms are available, and I trust that the process would kick in ASAP to start vetting the requirements of membership and have the membership listing updated to reflect something that is true and real.
Mr. Paray, are you aware of anyone else in the Mayaro constituency who may have collected a nomination form to go up against?
No, normally those things are not made public. I do believe when you collect a nomination form, you do have to sign as to exactly what constituency that you are applying for. You are not limited. So if I wanted to file for any other constituency, including Mayaro, I can do that as a member of the party as well. But I am not aware if anybody else has collected nomination forms for Mayaro as yet.
What are your thoughts on Mrs. Pasabi-Sessa's recent comments about, and I'm paraphrasing here, third parties needing to pull their weight? The UNC pays for infrastructure X and Y, and people just want to come in. I'm paraphrasing here, so please correct me if I go astray. And that's seeming to have elicited the response from Gary Griffith. In the context of what you just discussed about the UNC being open to uniting with other parties in the interest of the country, that those comments seem to have generated some friction, if I can call it that.
Well, I mean, I can't speak on what Mrs. Pasabi-Sessa line and length of thinking. I mean, we must realize that Mrs. Pasabi-Sessa had a very unimaginable task in 2010 to manage a partnership with so many groups of people. And I think from her experience, and I mean, I had a one-on-one conversation, casual conversation with Mrs. Pasabi-Sessa a couple of years ago. We were sitting on the bench of the parliament on the outside. And, she was telling me how difficult it was in managing these various groups as a leader. And how difficult when the demands are made. So I am not surprised that Mrs. Pasabi-Sessa has adopted a particular position on that. Whether it's a party position, I don't know. Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar is entitled to her opinion as the political leader. But I have my view on how we ought to be managing relationships, because I do believe, as I said before, every single group or person has a valuable role to play in moving Trinidad into
2025 is the next general election. The UNC under Mrs. Prasad-Bissessar has not been victorious in 2015, neither in 2020. What do you think is the main reason, or were the main reasons for the PNM being able to hold on to the reins of governance in the country, as opposed to people choosing the UNC on those two occasions nationally?
Well, I would say this. If we were not selected by the electorate in 2020 or 2015, there must be fundamental reasons for that, because I said both administrations were founded on excellent work in terms of the development of the country and so on. All I would want to say on that is that perhaps the country did not accept that we had the best team before them. And this is why I'm saying, because of the democracy that exists within the UNC and the framers of our constitution, putting a reset button called the NATEX elections every 2 years, it gives the membership. And I want to stress this, and this is the point I would like to leave in the minds of everybody here, that we are at the dispense and at the behest of our membership. And if the membership of the party feels that we had a problem in 2015, we had a problem in 2020, well, perhaps we need to revise and refresh going into 2025.
But what do you think the problem was? Because I'm sure you're an intelligent man, a businessman. You have a pretty good understanding of the lay of the political land. And a party that was in power from 2010 to 2015, as you, in your words, performed well beyond expectation, is the phrase you used, were not successful in being re-elected in 2015, and neither again in 2020. There must have been some reflection and introspection by the party, by yourself as an MP, as to what is the main reason that didn't happen.
Do you believe it's a membership problem or a leadership problem?
I don't think it's one problem. I think it may have been an amalgamation of a number of things. Our communication strategy, the way how the selection processes may have happened. But, I mean, you've heard the cries of the people at the end of the day. We've heard it. I've heard it. I don't want to speculate. I have my personal views on certain things and why things didn't happen as it's supposed to be. But I want to anchor this, unless we can convince the citizenry of Trinidad and Tobago by virtue of the will of our membership that we are going to carry the best team to 2025. Well, then we may be in a bit of problem.
But the core membership is not going to ever, and either the PNM side nor the UNC side, get a political entity in power, whether it be a partnership or a single party like the PNM. It has to be able to convince those primarily non-aligned voters, the swing voters as we call them, in those swing constituencies. That is the secret to getting first past the post in our system. What do you think about the UNC's performance, or the PNM performance conversely, is going to make that difference in 2025?
Well, I can tell you the PNM's performance has been absolutely dismal for the last 8 years. And the
UNC said that in 2015 and 2020.
Well, it is the truth.
And even if we take your word as the truth, it's still, the PNM was still successful, even though you're saying in your words the PNM's performance is dismal. So there must be some other factor, if we have to take your assessment of the situation, that gets the PNM first past the post on those two occasions.
So I'll tell you something by not telling you something, right? If we know performance is not the lever to win an election, we know exactly what it is going to take to win an election in the United National Congress.
And what is that?
It is the secret in our sauce that is going to remain secret. All right? It is the secret that is going to remain secret. I mean, I can't give you the strategy.
In 2020, it's remained a secret in 2015 and 2020. Will the secret be revealed in 2025? Because you're talking in parables, so I don't know what you're talking about?
Well, I have no choice but to talk in parables. But because
I can
don't
tell
want
you,
to
I can tell you something, Mr. Parry.
Yes.
In 2010, the PNM went into an election with Mr. Manning and lost. By 2015, they had a new leader in Dr. Rowley, and he remained there, especially after the conduct of the government during the COVID crisis, right?
Yeah.
Are you suggesting then, okay, because I'm trying to read what you're saying without saying it, that maybe a change of leadership may do it for the UNC?
Well, if that is the will of the membership, understand this, and I'm being very clear here.
Mr. Parry,
Wait,
Mr. Parry.
hang on. This is not private sector where you apply for a job. You cannot apply for the job of a political leader. The membership has to agree that leadership change is needed. And this leadership is not about the political leader alone.
Agreed.
You're talking about an executive. You're talking about a party system, party organs. And it has to be the will of the membership. It's not that Parry feels he's the best man for the work and he won the work. No, it don't work so. It means that you have to be able to convince the membership, right? Or the membership must have that call. Let's put it that way, that something is needed. And as you rightfully put it, we presented something to the public in 2015. We presented something to the public in 2020. And it was not what the public wanted. So the question is, and that the membership has to ask, what are we going to present to the public in 2025? Is it going to be different? If the membership feel that we are on the right track, well, the membership will make a particular decision and the best possible team will be there in 2025. If the membership says, well, look, we require change, the membership will decide it because it rests in the membership of the party, not in any one particular person at the end of the day. And that is my view on the matter.
Do you think so? Good morning, Richard.
Morning, guys.
Hey, morning, Richard.
Morning, guys.
Do you think, based on the fact that the Mrs. Pasabi says was able to become prime minister under a partnership arrangement, that is the secret that was missing in 2015 and 2020? Because in 2010, when Mrs. Pasabi says led the UNC and her coalition partners to power, it was that kind of arrangement. Is that the secret that we're talking about?
Well, it could be, and no options are off the board. And as I said, in the UNC, the word united means exactly that. We will continue to work. We will continue to work with every relationship until it becomes unworkable, and then we'll figure out where it went wrong. Listen, we need to have some clear vision and idea of where we want to go, and we have to work hard at it. And it must be grounded on the will of the membership. And we wait to see. The framers of our constitution put those things in place to make sure that there is a refreshing of our mandate ever so often for political organizations to evolve based on the conditions that exist. And I'll give you a simple example. We brought a national transformation plan to the public in 2020. And that was, pre-COVID. It was sitting well with, our climate change agenda, the sustainable development goals. Now in 2025, we have to refresh that to, encompass more things like digital transformation, intelligent municipalities, intelligence to the curb, cutting red tape of government services. All of these things have to be relooked at in 2025, and perhaps we will do a better job of articulating those positions to the general public when the election time comes. And hopefully they will jump on board with our vision to, restructure, reshape, and redirect Trinidad and Tobago as we head into 2025 and beyond.
Yeah, I'm not too sure if this question has been asked, Mr. Parry, but in terms of leadership, how much of it, in your opinion, lies on the personal integrity of the person in the position? And I'm speaking in a broad sense here, leadership. And when look, I am no longer providing value. And it is time for me to make way and room for people who can provide better value in taking an institution forward. At what point does that factoring into a leader's DNA?
Leadership is critically important in any organization, whether you run a parlor, a supermarket, a conglomerate, a political organization. Leadership is key. I have a different view. I think 20 or 30 years ago, the political landscape was different. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, leaders would have taken a team to government. Today, I believe a team has to take leaders to government. Leaders provide direction. Leaders ought to provide direction. Leaders ought to set the stage for empowering people. In my organization here in Mayaro, in my constituency office, the parliament is always amazed when I send my reports in terms of the amount of work that we do in Mayaro, because I empower my staff to act. I empower my office manager, my customer service representatives. We use a lot of digital systems in the office. So if you don't provide that type of leadership, you would not excel at the end of the day. So to come back specifically to the question, leadership is important. You must find a length and line in terms of how you communicate, how you empower, how you get feedback. I am saying one of the traits that I carry in my personal business, I have about 60 guys who are, many of them a lot academically, well qualified than I am. But I depend on their advice to listen, to understand what's happening. And I know what my customer wants. So I will tell them what the customer wants, and they will say, well, Rushton, we need to go A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We could do it this way, that way. And then we come together and we come with a plan forward. So in general, leadership in anything is critical to the success in any
Well, I'm glad you
organization.
said that, because to follow Richard's question, and good morning to Larry, Lala, SC, and Dr. Fuad Khan and others on the stream. Brand PNM under Patrick Manning was different to brand PNM under Dr. Keith Rowley. Brand UNC under Mr. Pandey is different to brand UNC under Mrs. Pasal Bisesa. How do you think the public assesses, because this has significant implication not only for the party internally, but the external perceptions of the party as an option for leadership in the country? Would you agree with that statement?
Absolutely.
Branding, because you're a businessman, the brand is very important. Yeah. How the public perceives, not how the party perceives itself, but how the public perceives is what the brand is, not what people think about themselves, what the public gets from you. How do you assess brand UNC at this point?
Brand UNC to me is a work in progress. I do believe that we are re-strengthening our brand. There has been a considerable amount of work happening. I mean, primarily we've started those crime consultations. Very, very soon there's a number of other type of consultation that will be executed on the ground to lift the brand of the party, go into other areas and discuss, deeply in terms of infrastructure, health, education, those other pieces that form, the mechanisms in our society. But brand is important. Everybody wants to align with the best brand that is possible. And refreshing of brands, every now and then, brands ought to be refreshed. Long ago it was Kentucky Fried Chicken, now it's KFC. Long ago was Republic Bank, now it's RBTT. So there is always...
So how is brand UNC different today than it was in 2015?
Well, I don't think that we've lost considerably in terms of our brand. I think we have weakened a bit based on a number of issues that have come up from time to time. But it is not impossible to rebrand. It is not impossible to re-strengthen the brand, because we are a strong political vehicle in the United National Congress. That is a fact. And all we have to do really is, take a very good retrospective look at the areas that we have become weak in, and we have to make some decisive action in repairing those things. And we have some time. We have about 18 months, I think, probably 2 years, let's put it this way, because I do believe Dr. Rowley is going to stretch the general election to its maximum till probably November next year. So we do have time.
Has that been his history?
Yeah. Well, the tremendous amount of pressure that the PNM is going to come under from a very strong United National Congress over the next few months, I don't think any prime minister, or what we'll call a lame duck prime minister, will want to leave office sooner than is necessary. So this is just my suspect at the end of the day, because we are going to come strong and hard at the PNM over the next couple of months.
With a weak leadership?
Well, I mean, that could be your view. All right.
I
As I
know,
said,
as
that
a
the
businessman,
membership of
I've read between your lines whole morning, Mr. Parry.
the
Clearly, leadership is
incontrovertible
about there.
fact and evidence we have, besides everybody has a perception politically, is that the public chose X over Y in the last two general elections, and that is incontrovertible. Everything else is perception, and that's why I ask if there's a difference in public perception or brand that you think is palpable enough to make a difference in 2025, because that is essentially what it comes down to.
I will say this, that everything that we need to do in the United National Congress to improve our brand image, whether it be look, style, color, faces, people, language, all possibilities are on the table, and we are making an aggressive move to clean and strengthen those things going forward. And as I said, any changes that will come in the United National Congress will be based on the will of the membership. And that is something that I have the greatest respect for in terms of how do we define political leadership standing on the strength of your membership, and that your membership as well must always be logged in the bosom of leadership. There must never be a big space between that. And perhaps those are the things that we need to correct going forward.